Hello, everyone. Demetrius here. Joined. Guess who's back? Back again.
Jesse is back.
Jesse Engel. How's it going, Jesse?
It is going pretty good. How about yourself?
Never better. I'm glad to have you over. Good practice. We had a good day on the table, and now we're going to have a good day doing a podcast. So I'm excited to have you. How have you been?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Not a ton of pool involved in life lately, but I'm starting to hit a few balls again. So
Always a threat. Always a threat.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm actually. This is kind of cool. I'm lucky to have the opportunity to do a podcast. I was scheduled to be at the Super Billiard Expo, but my flight anyway. I spent a lot of time at the E16 gate at the Minneapolis airport, only to find out that my plane was not going to, in fact, take off due to maintenance issues. And so I would have. I'd already forfeit my first match if I got a new flight. So turned out that I decided to stay here and just kind of degen out and play a bunch of pool with you and some of my buddies locally. So now we have time for a podcast. So thank gosh my plane got canceled. Otherwise, we couldn't be bringing this to you all here in podcast listening, Bill. So
it's definitely a way to look at it. Got to find the positive in everything.
silver lining, man. Got to find the silver lining. So okay, what do we? I'm kind of excited. We've got a few cool things to talk about, but first, I'll let's get something going with the softball. Is a listener question about table size and how much room you need to fit a pool table. I'm sure everybody that wants a pool table has asked this question. So Jesse, what do you think? How big of a room do you need for a
Yeah,
pool
I
table?
mean, well, obviously it depends slightly on your table size. But ideally, I would assume that most people want a 9 foot pool table. But I guess if you're just like
Oh,
I don't know. No,
oh,
if you just need a bar table, a 7 footer, then I mean they say that you're supposed to add 5 feet to each side of that. So if you're thinking 3.5 width by 7, that's not really the playing field. It's actually a little bit smaller. So a good comfortable way would say obviously 5 on each end, which is 10 plus 7, so 17 by what I guess like 13 and a half roughly is what you'd need. What I've found personally is that if you're getting too tight to that line, it's not the most comfortable, and that's not even considering adding an extension to your cue. It's just, at least for me, the way that I approach each shot, I like to kind of stand back and then sort of ease in forward. So, and I'm a 6 foot tall guy, so it's getting a little crunch when you're right at that number. And yeah, I don't
yeah,
know what your
yeah,
thoughts
that's
are.
that's exactly right. I have a table in my house, and I have a 9 foot, and I have plenty of room lengthwise. Uh, but the width of it is so my table, of course, 4.5 by 9, and my room width is about 14.6 inches, 14 foot 6 inches. So it's almost exactly 5 feet on each side. And the way that that plays out is, if it was in short, if it was 2 inches tighter, it wouldn't work. And if it was 2 inches wider, it would be like dreamy. At 14.6, at exactly 5 inches on each side, if the cue ball's on the rail or within an inch of the side rail, and you're shooting directly away from it, you can still level off and you can still take practice strokes. But if you have to shoot it, like if you're shooting a soft roll from off the rail where you're taking a shorter practice stroke, you might not notice the wall. But if you are on the rail, shooting away from the rail, and you need to kind of shoot a medium firm speed shot where you're going to kind of try to let your stroke out a little, you'd like to be able to, you try to take the length of practice stroke you want. Maybe your bridge hands propped up against the rail, and you want to take that nice, 6 inch swing, 6 to 8 inch swing, and all of a sudden you bump your butt out of the cue on the wall. And so you can still shoot the shot with a level cue, but you don't quite have the room to really let out a flowing stroke from off the rail. And so, how often does this come up? And I think that, well, we just played a session today. I mean, we probably played 3 or 4 hours, 3 hours. How often do you think the wall came into play?
Well, I mean, I know specifically that I had at least three, but I'm trying. I think even a fourth shot came up where it was definitely in play. Now,
But you
luckily,
have an extension, right?
and I do have a 3 inch extension, but I will say that two of those shots, it was fortunate where when the cue ball was basically frozen on the rail, I didn't have to hit it too hard. It was kind of a rolling shot, so I didn't have to pull back and get the full extension there. But yeah, it definitely comes into play a lot more than you think. And like I said, especially having an extension, even just the approach on shots where the cue ball is 6 inches away from the rail, it's just very uncomfortable because as you're coming, down with your little pre-shot routine, the butt of the cue obviously bumps into the wall quite a bit.
So my
So,
experience is a little different, maybe because I don't play with an extension. I'm not 6 foot, and I have plenty of room lengthwise. But the way that that plays out is, if it was in short, if it was 2 inches tighter, it wouldn't work. And if it was 2 inches wider, it would be like dreamy. At 14.6, at exactly 5 inches on each side, you can still shoot the shot with a level cue, but you don't quite have the room to really let out a flowing stroke from off the rail. And so, how often does this come up? And I think that, well, we just played a session today. I mean, we probably played 3 or 4 hours, 3 hours. How often do you think Anyway, for me, I would say that if I played for 3 or 4 hours, it probably comes up an average of once every few hours for me. Like if I play 3 or 4 hours, maybe one time I bump the wall in a backswing and just have to compact it a little bit. Um, and even then, it rarely actually impacts my shot. So I can probably on my table, I can play a week of pool, and I really don't ever feel like it impacts my performance. I might notice it once every hour or two, but it never really impacts my performance. But my point of this is maybe for Jesse, it's just a little bit more than that. But I would say my whole point of elaborating like this is I like to tell people if the room was 2 inches bigger or wider, I guess, then bigger, just 2 inches more cubic space in the room somewhere. No, if it was 2 inches wider, I think I would like almost never notice it. But if it was 2 inches tighter, what happens is it would go from 2 inches wider, it would be like perfect. To the way it is right now, it's manageable. But if it was 2 inches tighter, it would drive me nuts because then all of a sudden I couldn't even level off. I'd have to elevate. And so the point is it's like an exponential impact on your convenience. Like I'm actually my table plays good enough to where I can play money matches on my table and not think it's going to get in the way. But if it was like 2 inches tighter, I wouldn't even want to like play a real set on my table or anything like that because it would just be like kind of gaff. And so the reason I'm elaborating like this is because for people that are listening and everybody wants to fit a table in their house. And if you have a room that's almost big enough, you could be like, you want it so bad that you're going to squint at the room dimensions a little bit, just wedge it on in there. And I'm just imploring you guys, it's don't do it. It's just going to drive you completely nuts. And for me, I mean, of course, this is wishful thinking, but it depends on how big pool is in your life. But for me, pool is such a big deal in my life that to have a table in my house that doesn't play well, that you can't play on the way you want to play on it, would just be like every day it would gnaw at my soul because I can't play the game I want to play. And so if you only have a 13 and a half by 7 room, you can fit a bar table in by 17. And if it's 2 inches tight, and then you might have some decisions to make. But I guess if my room was say 14 foot by 20, I would just get an 8 foot table then. You know what I mean? I would rather have an 8 foot where you can play pool on it than, so if you're on the threshold. So anyway, do with this information what you will, but just understand you need 5 feet minimum, minimum, minimum. And don't listen to any websites that have other specification recommendations because anybody that's trying to sell pool tables will give you really, really, really blue sky, like, oh, it'll be fine. And that's the first thing. And then other things too is that if you're kind of new to pool and you don't really know this stuff, everybody that like I've had a lot of friends that aren't pool players that all think they have plenty of room for a pool table because they're looking at a big room and they're just like, oh, I can fit a table in there, no problem. But there's a huge difference between fitting a table in versus having 5 feet of clearance on each side. And for whatever reason in our country, the rooms always seem to be 13 and a half feet wide. It just seems like that's a real standard family room dimension width. And it's just not quite enough for a 9 foot. And so, anyway, do with that information what you will, but I have to question 5 feet minimum, preferably 5.5.
Yeah, and I will just add one thing. So at my house, obviously Demi's played at my house, and vice versa. So when I moved in there, that was like the only house that I could find that had a room that was going to be clearly big enough for a 9 footer. So I had a lengthwise, I knew I was going to have like 23 and a half feet, which is plenty. And then the width, when I measured it, wall to wall, like it was exactly 15 feet and 1 inch. And I made the last minute decision to, even though it was going to add a bunch of work, was to slide that entire wall back like another about 6.5 inches. And that makes the world of difference. I mean, when you center it in there, I mean, I look back now and I think if I would have left those 6 inches, the 3 inch on each side, I mean, just the amount of times that I probably wouldn't have like been inhibited from playing, but even just bumping my cue here, it just reminds me of it's worth it, man. So yeah, if you're looking, like you said, don't stretch your room or your table size to try to like squeeze it into a tight room. It's just not worth it. It destroys the game, and it'll be
Well, you've
like
given
big
me
regret.
an idea. Next time we play, we're going to have a rule where you can't take the extension off your cue.
Yeah, that's one way
That's
to
going to
look
have
at
to
it.
be the spot anyway.
Or just get a bigger room. But it is good every now and then to just remember how the other half still lives. So that's why I like coming over here. I'm
Wow.
just kidding.
Wow. All right. Very good. Moving on. So we've got we got a fun topic coming up. But first, I wanted to hit you with a kind of a funny story. So actually, I wasn't the only one to forfeit out of the Super Billiard Expo. I was actually there with Danny Olson, and he was going to play as well, and then with a buddy of mine, Matt Cady from South Dakota, and so they came out and we were going to fly out together and go play. So, but when I saw Danny, it reminded me of kind of a funny story. Is when I was hanging out, I got to sweat a match with Danny at the Derby a few months ago, and we one of the matches we were watching a Bigfoot match, and one of the entrants had to withdraw for some reason, so they filled that spot with a local player who was a good player, but it was a pretty lopsided match in terms of like I think it was like Roberto Gomez, and the guy who was playing was a good local player, like 620 Fargo, which is a strong local player, but Roberto Gomez is the point is if Danny and I wanted to make a sweat bet on the match, but it's a hard match to handicap because we're not obviously going to bet even. So we were kind of speculating as to like games on the wire, and I'm like, it would be a fun sweat bet. They had the big screen up there with TPA, and I asked him, I said, what do you think the over under is on the total TPA? So for people that don't know, TPA is total performance average. And what it is that it keeps a ratio of pocketed balls versus errors made. So if somebody makes 10 balls in a row, their TPA is a 1.0, it's 1,000. But if they missed a ball, and well, let's make it easy. If they made 9 balls and missed a 10th, then their TPA would be 0.900. It'd be 900 because they're 90%. And safety errors and scratching in the break counts as a mistake, or missed kick shots, I think, might be an error. Anyway, world-class pool has always been considered 850. And when people play sets in the 900s, that's really strong. And this is actually even more difficult on a 10-foot table. So Roberto Gomez, so we're trying to figure out. So let me ask you, what do you think the over-under is on the TPA? Let's make this interactive here.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I'm trying to think what I've seen for that. Like when two great players play a good set, it's usually one of them is like low 800s, or maybe somebody's in like the mid 700s would be like a kind of below average set.
Maybe the losing players are the 780s, and then the winning players like 900 ish.
Yeah, so if we assume that that's like in the 1550 range, or like 1530 for average, something like that. I don't know, with a Fargo player at that rate, I would say the line's got to be somewhere around. It's still got to be somewhere around 1400, right?
That's so funny. That's really, really close. That's really close to where we drew the line.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's just amazing. So the funny part is it was really hard because we've never really seen a lot of 620s perform under pressure on a 10-foot table and keep track of their TPA. So I had no idea what the line would be. And so Danny was kind of coming up with it. I think he wanted to bet the under on 1450. And I was like, ooh, I don't know, man. I'm like, I think I wanted to be I'm like, tell you what, why don't you take the under on 1400? And then he's like, we kind of agreed on 1420. And anyway, so I think that's where we drew the line. It was 1420. What I didn't really take into account was that Roberto might not be pushed to play his best game if he's way up on the score and getting lots of chances. Sure. And that was kind of what hosed me betting the over. So the reason I tell this story is anybody that's looking for a sweat bet when there's two guys playing where they're keeping track of TPA, that's a really, really, really fun. It was like the most fun sweat bet I've ever had because it was a really wild ride. Because what happened is early on, they made a few mistakes, and the TPA, the 620 Fargo rate player, his TPA was like 100. It was like he'd made a few mistakes and he'd only made one ball. It was like really low. And then all of a sudden, but it was a small sample size because Roberto was doing most of the shooting. So it was almost like Roberto's TPA didn't really matter. It was all coming down to it all came down to this other guy. And the other guy, he didn't really get that many shots. So all of a sudden, if he had a 7-ball run, his TPA would go from like, 200, all of a sudden it would jump up to like 600. And I'd be like, ha. And then the cool part is I don't need him to run out. Like if Roberto hangs the 2-ball, I'm like, I don't care if he doesn't get it to the 10. If he could just run the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and then miss, like I just picked up like 150 TPA points. So anyway, the whole set, it started off where it was like the combined TPA was like 900. I was nowhere close to the 1400 I needed. And then this guy went on a tear and he starts running 6, 7 balls at a time. And he was clearing tables to the 8-ball and clearing tables to the 9-ball. And then actually, I'm actually hoping at this point, Roberto's close enough to the hill that after this guy runs 7, 8 balls, I'm actually hoping he misses the 10 because then Roberto can win the game and get closer to the finish line. I just want this to get over, And so all of a sudden the combined score jumped up. And anyway, it was back and forth the whole way. And it was came down to the wire. And in the end, the combined TPA, that the guy played well. And I'm not making fun of him. He actually played really well. And I ended up clipping Danny Olson. So that was anybody that's looking for a sweat bet when they're doing TPA, I highly recommend betting on the combined TPAs because there's just a lot of drama on every shot, and you just never really. And then if they get into a
That's pretty
safety
cool.
battle where they're playing two-way shots and missing the pocket, they could just bust up anyway. It's okay. It was a fun sweat bet. So we'll have to do that next time. All right. So okay, let's get serious. I should talk quickly. I'm going to plug my boot camp quickly. People learn how to play pool. Come to my 3-day boot camp. mnpoolbootcamp.com stands for Minnesota poolbootcamp.com. I've been doing this full time for 4.5 years now. I do quite a few sessions, almost 3 a month, I suppose. And I just there's so much you can learn on your own in terms of knowledge. You can go online and watch videos, and you can watch pros play, and you can read articles. But what I've seen is that people it does a lot for them. People learn a lot, and they do improve. But when they come and play with me, I'm always able to spot gaps in their game, things that maybe they have the knowledge but they interpret it wrong, or they're trying to apply it wrong, or they're just it's not smooth and blended together correctly, and they're missing a few pieces, and maybe they got a few pieces. You know what it reminds me of is I don't know if you ever had to do this as an experiment where somebody says, okay, draw a circle. Now draw a box, a square underneath the circle. Have you ever, where they're giving you like instructions on what to draw, and you're trying to draw a picture based on their verbal instructions, and then they show you the picture that they were describing, and you look at the picture you drew and see how different it was. That's how I feel about people's pool games, where it's like they've drawn a lot of the right things, but it just didn't come together the way the picture was supposed to look. And you can do this on through video and on your own and playing local players in your pool room, and you can learn and trial and error and develop some skills and get better. But if you want to really learn to play high level pool, I can take you by the hand and help you identify the pieces that it takes, develop those pieces, and put them together in the way that they're supposed to look. And of course, I don't play, absolute world class pool, and you're not going to when you leave here. But I don't just do teaching, I do teaching and training because we have 3 days. So I'm going to teach some things, but we're also going to train it and practice it and work it into your game so that when you leave here, you will actually, you're going to have a different toolbox, and it's going to be assembled in a different way. That's going to be a big step in the right direction, as well as providing some back end support and ongoing coaching to help you keep down that road that we started on. So check it out, mnpoolbootcamp.com. I would love to train with you. But the reason I bring that up, in addition to plugging my boot camp, is I was thinking a little bit, we were kind of talking earlier about what it is that people want, like not just why they play pool, but why they want to improve at pool and why they want to get better and what's the underlying motivation. So, Jesse, that sounds obvious, right? I want to get better at pool. But why do people want to improve at pool? What do you think, Jesse?
Yeah. So you should say why, also why they were playing, or you like how they get started, or just why they want to.
Let's, it's such a broad topic. Let's
Yeah.
narrow it down. Like, what do you think when people call me? Like, I was thinking about this. So let's just frame it this way. When people call me for training, there's different motivations. But what do you think they're hoping for?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I think in general, I think a lot of people who have been playing pool for quite a long time, inevitably we all find some sort of like plateau where, I mean, the learning curve just has to slow down eventually. And I think it's a mixture of people not really understanding their own leaks, or like how to, like you said, how to put the pieces together and kind of progress, as well as maybe mixed in with some frustration of lack of results of what they feel that they should have at that point in their pool career, whatever that may be for each individual. So yeah, that would be the general answer for that I put together there.
Yeah, so that's reasonable, and that seems right. I think that as I was thinking about it, I could say that there's some reasonable desires and some reasonable, when I say reasonable, I mean healthy and achievable. And then there's some desires that might be, I don't know about unhealthy, but maybe misguided and unachievable. And so I think that that would be, I just wanted to talk about like what are some achievable goals versus what are some unachievable goals and make sure that we're training pool for the right reasons. And so what I thought about was an achievable goal is what you just said, which is there's some things that are really, really enjoyable. So first of all, playing this game and then learning to, learning the game better so that you can, better have the right tool set to diagnose your a more sophisticated approach to reading racks and a more sophisticated tool set of how to handle the challenges that come up so that you're able to more and more often, recognize problems and then use your tools to overcome those problems and have successes that you weren't able to have before, whether that's running a rack that you wouldn't have been able to run before, doing it cleaner, or having it more often, it goes the way you're planning. And then, having results in tournaments and against players that you weren't able to beat before, better tournament finishes, better high runs, all those things are very rewarding. And just watching, the process of developing into a more competent player, all those things are very satisfying. And that's what I think is, would you agree that's kind of like a healthy growth desire?
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty good.
So then I wanted to just mention what I think is like the misguided desire, which is, and I think the reason I'm talking about it is I don't think people recognize this. I think it's very common. People don't, they just want to feel good and they don't want to feel bad. And so some people are, okay, so almost everybody, when you're playing your absolute best, it feels awesome. And when you're playing your worst, it feels pretty cruddy. And so people have this idea, well, I want to feel good more of the time. So if I play the game better, then I will play better. And then I'll always feel the way I feel when I'm playing my best. And wouldn't that be great? And some people, one step further, their baseline in life is maybe they're not feeling so good about themselves or they're not very content or happy in their own lives. And so they turn to pool as a escape, as something that gives them some joy, but that the joy they get only comes when they're playing towards the top of their performance range. And so, maybe they're unhappy in their lives or discontent in their lives, and then they're trying to find a way to extract more joy out of pool. And they think the path towards being happier in pool is playing better, and that'll make their life feel better as well. But why doesn't that work, Jesse?
Well, a lot of reasons. That just reminded me of a local player that I don't need to say the name or anything, but well, no, I mean it's not a bad thing. It's just I did talk to there was a local player. I think it was about a year or a year and a half ago now, and he was getting kind of frustrated for a lot of the same reason you just said, And kind of what I pinpointed for him was that I feel like he was just very, very results oriented. Like it didn't even matter if he played good. It was just if he lost a match, he'll even when I would watch the match, I'd be like, well, you didn't play bad. Like there's no real reason to be upset. But that kind of like I hit it like an aha moment for myself almost right there because it's something that I already sort of overcome in my pool career. But I realized that yeah, people are playing maybe for the wrong reasons or they go into their sessions with like a poor mindset trying to make up for, like you said, they're almost escaping, but they're only going to end in a happy scenario if everything goes the way that they had already pre-planned it to go. So anyways, back to the original question he asked, which was
No, you mentioned it, and it's really interesting because we've talked about it before. There's process and there's results, and that a good mindset is really one about process based and enjoying adversity. Whereas the problem with saying winners win, losers lose, it feels better if I can only feel good if I win, and if I lose, I can't allow myself to be okay with losing because if I'm okay with losing, then only show me a good loser, I'll show you a loser. The problem with that mindset is if you tell yourself, if I lose, I'm going to have to be miserable and punish myself and hate myself and wreck my weekend and torture myself, it sounds like, well, that's really motivating. But what it's actually doing is creating a lot of performance pressure because now whether or not I have a terrible weekend or a great weekend comes back down to whether I can pocket these balls. And some people think that that's good because that's a motivator, but I think that that creates a lot of pressure. And so that's why I don't really know that I like doing it that way. Um, I don't know that you need that to be motivated. I found that there's plenty of motivation I've never been in a deficit of motivation to want to, pocket balls and win. I don't have to add extra pressure to that, I think. So the okay, well, I lost my train of thought. So what I was going to reference to is I had someone call me up one time, and they were dealing with depression, and they really felt that the answer was that they were going to become a champion pool player, and that was going to make them feel better about themselves. And I've said it before, but I just want to tell everybody, getting the problem with trying to improve your performance to feel better is that it's not your there's absolute performance and relative performance. So absolute performance means in a vacuum, how good are you playing? Like, are you playing? What level are you playing at? How many tables are you running? How many balls are you running? How many balls are you missing? But then there's relative performance, which is how well are you playing compared to your own average? And the problem is that if somebody on average plays at a certain level, then when they play way above that level, when they're having a good day, it feels great. And when they're having a terrible day, they're playing below their level and it feels terrible at times. So if they improve their overall baseline level, they can get better at pool. But then when in the future, when they're playing, two balls better, they're 100 Fargo points better. Now, when they have their worst day, their absolute performance is better than their old worst day. But relatively, now they're acclimated to a new level of performance. And so now when they're having their worst day, it still feels terrible. So I mentioned this, like, I've seen all the top players dog it. And so I know that when Federer is having a bad day and loses in the finals of the US Open to Ko Ping Chung, he's not feeling joyous because at least I'm playing better than Demetrius. He's like, it was a tough day for him and he didn't feel very good about it. And so the problem is that you can raise your skill level, but you can't change the fact that it's always going to hurt when you're playing your worst. And that average is a funny thing because most players really they say things like, they try to be reasonable. They say things like this: well, I don't expect to play my best all the time. That would be ridiculous. But if I could at least play my average all the time, and just, and then some days I'm playing my best and other days I just play average, and just get rid of those bad days. That's what I want. But why doesn't that make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it doesn't make sense because in order for there to be an average, you have to have the highs and you have to have the lows. But of course, like you said, most people don't want to have to deal with the negative, feelings that come with the lows.
Yeah, basically, if you get rid of the lows and you play somewhere between average and great, then the average becomes a little bit better than average, and average becomes the new low.
Yeah.
And it's going to feel the same way. And so, in the end, what it all comes down to, guys, to boil it all down, what people are really saying is, I just want to feel good all the time, and I don't want to feel bad ever. So, how do I do it so I just never feel bad and I always feel good? And it's a sensible desire, but it does not make sense. This is a Wookiee. This is Chewbacca. Remember the Wookiee defense?
Yeah.
Anyway, it does not make sense. So it's not a reasonable goal. And that's where when people call me, everybody says they want to be consistent. People oftentimes they don't want to improve, they want to be consistent and eliminate bad days. And of course, that's what gets people. The desire to eliminate bad days leads them to a desire for consistency. And the desire for consistency leads to a desire to work on fundamentals and try to figure out how to set it up to where they never break down fundamentally because they think that'll eliminate their bad days. And that's why people that train fundamentals and sell stuff that's supposed to give you a perfect stroke, those guys are always going to make a lot of money because people want to chase that. But in the end, it's like, I just want people to know it's kind of a 5-year-old way of thinking. I just want to feel good all the time. I just want to eat ice cream all the time. And so just moment of silence Pool's a tough game. It's going to be bumpy. But if you know that, then when you're playing bad and you're having those bad days, you don't, it won't feel great, but you don't have to make it worse by thinking that you're missing out on this. If only I had this secret that I'd feel good all the time, and I'm missing out on this ocean of happiness that I could have if only I could get rid of my bad days. That's not the way to look at it. You just have to look at it like there's going to be ups and downs. And I'll end by saying this: I made my decision a long time ago. You're going to have a bell curve, and 50% of the time you're going to play in the middle 50%. Sometimes you play at the top 1%. Sometimes you play at the bottom 1%. But there's a very important question you have to answer, which is this: what percentage of the time do you want to enjoy your pool sessions? Do you want to enjoy your pool sessions 50% of the time, 1% of the time, 10% of the time, or 100% of the time? And the trick to enjoying your pool sessions 100% of the time cannot be to have 100% of the time you perform be in the top 1% of your performance range, because that's not how that works. The only way to enjoy 100% of your sessions is to have fun unconditionally, and to say it's unconditional that no matter how good or bad I play today, I'm going to enjoy the session I play. And if it's a bad day, I'm going to enjoy my bad day. That would be my tip. And I know a lot of people are bucking right now and saying, again, well, if I'm okay with my bad days, I won't want to get better. I don't have time to go down that right now. If you want to pursue that train of thought, I also do mental game coaching. It's been going great. I really, 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 it's the most meaningful thing I've ever done in my life. So look up mnpoolbootcamp.com, contact me, and we can do some mental game coaching. And I'd love to talk further about it, but there you go.
Yeah, and I will just add one more thing to that, which is we all do have like a low point in our game. I mean, I deal with this still today, where you can't fully focus. There's just something off when you go to play, and even for someone my skill level, it's still very frustrating to not be able to perform even at what would be considered my average or slightly above it. It's not fun to go through, but like Demi said, it's a much like deeper hole to go down, and it takes a lot of time to kind of work on that side of your game. But what I will say is, regardless of where I guess where your Fargo rate's at, whatever your skill level, however you measure that, I would say that everybody could benefit wherever your skill level is right now, just to actually work on that part of the game, the mentally and dealing with that, because allowing that frustration to take over every part of you when you're like in those the lulls in your game, it just drops your skill level that much more wherever you're at right now. So may as well work on it now, and then as you continue to get better in the physical part of the game, your overall range of play, high to low, will be much tighter together.
Yeah, you can't make it better, but there's a lot of things you can do to make it worse. And so
Yes.
by accepting the way it is and accepting the turbulence of a pool career, you can avoid making it much, much worse.
Yeah.
And so I would just say this: when you play pool to have fun, you win as soon as you screw your cues together.
Yep. And this just reminds me of something that I used to hear people like talk about. Just I won't go too deep into it, but it's like when things are kind of going not your way in a set, and you see your opponent get down on a ball where you kind of feel like there's a chance they're going to miss it, but you've already decided in your head that you're going to end up being hooked or with a tough shot, right? You're just like, yeah, they're going to dog this, and then somehow I'm going to be half ball hooked, or they're going to leave it on the end rail. You've already decided that the result of the shot can't go in your favor, which may be true. It might happen, but that thought process does nothing good for you, and it doesn't really change what your opponent's about to do. But it's a good example that I think everybody listening could relate to, because we've all had that thought. So that'll if you have ever had that thought and you continue to have those thoughts, that's a perfect reason for you to take some time and work on your mental game.
Yeah, yeah. So what would you do if you're thinking that thought? Like, say we're playing today, and I mean, I say that came up today, but like, if you were to have that thought, what would you catch yourself, and what would you do?
Yeah, to be completely honest, I do still have not that exact thought, but like I said, I mean, I'm a human being. I have some negative emotion too still. So I know when I'm feeling that, because I've dealt with it so many times, that I've just been able to realize that there's nothing I can do to change the situation I'm in, the fact that maybe I can't fully focus, and that the balls really aren't rolling in my favor. So even to this day, I would just say the best thing that I do is I just try to remind myself that it is what it is, and I just have to try to do my best to give myself an opportunity to get out of the situation as far as like, winning, shooting my way out of it, overcoming the adversity. But I mean, yeah, I mean, the best way to say it is just there's really no way to just completely fix it. It's You're always going to have those intrusive thoughts that are somewhat negative when things aren't going your way, and just recognizing it and addressing it and trying your best to remind yourself and remain calm in the situation is better than allowing that anger to get the best of you.
Yeah, I think that what I could say is for me, I would use it as a flag to do a, as they say, a checkup from the neck up. So there's certain thoughts that I have that if I know that if I think that thought, that that's like a little warning bell. So for example, if I'm getting ready to shoot the three ball and I'm going to play shape for the four on the side, and I'm like, where do I want to get on the four? And I'm just kind of like, well, I don't know, somewhere out there where I can make it. Like all of a sudden, like a warning bell goes off, or I'm like, wait a minute, really? Is that what my target is? And then that's kind of a red flag that that's not a good enough answer for me. And so maybe I just take a second, walk around, look at the four ball, think about like exactly where I, not to the point of where I want to be, but kind of map out like what my range of target is, and kind of come to a more defined decision. So the next time I ask myself, okay, now where do I want to be in the four? Well, I'd like to get there maybe a little further. Let's, I just have a better answer than just, well, just make this ball and I'm sure I'll figure it out. When I start thinking, just make this ball, get on that ball, and then I'll just deal with it. I know for me that something bad's probably about to happen because that's not how I think when I'm playing well. So by recognizing that thought when it comes up, well, just get out, let's just make this ball and get on that ball and I'll figure it out. Then that's a reminder. It's a little red flag. It says, okay, that's not the right answer. Let's take a quick walk around the table and rethink this so I have a better answer. So the same way, when you catch yourself thinking, oh, something horrible is about to happen, that can be a little warning bell that, hey, I'm really not in the right mindset. And so now it's time to, that's like a little feedback for you that you're really not in a good mindset. So now how do you get out of a bad mindset into a better mindset? That is kind of what I teach, and I do that, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But my point is recognizing those types of thoughts is really useful if you have a plan of kind of how you're going to manage through those. So I'd say it's a good warning sign. So this perfectly segs into what we really want to talk about today, which is we talked about how we're always going to have bad days. But this is such an obvious question. I can't believe I've never really thought about it that much. Why do we have such a big range? Why do we have bad days? Like, I think about driving, and when I'm driving, I don't really have bad days. Like, it's not like every third day I'm like, I crashed another car. It was one of those bad days. It's like, generally speaking, I can drive and get to my destination. I don't really worry about it. There's not such a big performance curve when it comes to driving to the grocery store. And there's so many things. The same thing with like doing the laundry, or there's so many tasks I can do to where there's just not good days and bad days. Why with pool is there this big performance range? What causes bad days? Where do they come from? I know they can't be eliminated, but just out of morbid curiosity, what do you think, Jesse?
Yeah, so I have a couple thoughts. Well, there's two sides of this. There's a mental side and there's a physical side. Now, obviously, with the physical side of it, that's going to have to do with things like, I mean, are you like well fed? Are you get your nutrition? Are you like well rested? There's things like that that, of course, no matter how strong your mental game is, if your body's shaking and your eyes are kind of flickering and going in and out of focus,
Or if you have an extra Celsius energy drink on top of your 24-ounce monster right before a pool session.
That's funny.
That was rough, man.
Yeah. So there's things like that. Of course, like it doesn't matter how strong your mental game is; those will just have an effect on you. But the main thing I would say comes down to the mental side, and I can really just sum it up in one word, which is, of course, entitlement. And it goes a little bit deeper, but if you are able to be self-aware, then I, I really think you could find the root of almost every one of your bad days at pool, and you will find that it's very closely aligned with entitled thoughts. And we did talk about this a little bit earlier, but for myself, I could say I've noticed that when I've had days like this, they progressively either got worse or I just kind of blocked myself from allowing that, myself to even have a somewhat decent day because the entitled thoughts kind of came in of, I've put in all this work. I have a higher skill set. I'm whatever, you pick your reason. and assuming that I deserve to have a better result, or the balls are supposed to roll better for me. I'm not supposed to miss an easy ball like that. We've all had those things, right? So yeah, it just kind of boils down to some version of entitlement for me.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, there's a video, and I did with little Chris called the it's called the competitor cycle, and I didn't do a super deep dive, but for people that want to hear more about it, little Chris is the YouTuber, reached 100,000 subscribers last year, and if you search little Chris, Lil Chris, Chris, and then add in a competitor cycle, my a video comes up with Chris and I talking. It's where I go over the cycles of uh, entitlement versus humility. And I can't really get into that right now, but yeah, it's very, very interesting how, when we talked about this earlier, how you went right to entitlement as the cause of bad performance. And this is why, and it's actually cool too, because I'm going to be doing another podcast coming up soon with Nate Tam, and he wants to talk about the zone, and he's going to talk about good days and getting into the zone and some of the things behind getting in the zone. And so one of those things, though, is that'll be fun to hear that end of the conversation. So that's why I thought bad days would be a fun topic, because part of getting in the zone is not having bad days and not doing the things that cause bad days, which entitlement. So there's so many examples of that. And I'll just say one, which is like, boy, there's just a different way of thinking when you're entitled. What are some examples, Jesse? What are some thoughts that you might have at the table when you're running out a rack that are signs that you're in an entitled mindset? Can you give me an example?
Yeah, I guess if it's a pretty standard run out, let's say, right, and you're kind of just you almost feel like it's sort of you should just be able to kind of coast on autopilot and get through this rack, and then maybe your cue ball overruns like 3 inches, and you kind of get the little like a little bit of frustration, not an actual eye roll, but a little bit in your head. You're just like, well,
Where you leave yourself on the rail with a wall?
there you go, yeah. But you're just like, yeah, like, well, okay. Or if you let's say you hit a ball and it doesn't really skid, but maybe it's not like the cleanest feeling contact. You're just like, well, you just whatever. I mean, when you start kind of finding like little petty complaints on small things that are relatively standard in the everyday part of the game, then I would say that might be a warning sign. Also, I think if you're too concerned about the outcomes of your opponent's shots, I think that's a big one. I think, yeah,
Yeah, because that's completely out of your control. So that shows that if a way to think about this, if there's a huge circle that represents everything and everything that you can't control, and then in the middle of that circle, there's a tiny, tiny bullseye of things you can control. And things you can control are like your breathing, your decision making, your attitude, your effort. And that's about it. And so, in the end, when you start thinking about there's results and there's processes, and the processes are the things you can control. That's the bullseye. And then the results, how your opponent shoots, what they leave you, whether or not you get a shot after the break. There's so many things out of your control that when you start focusing a lot of energy on things you can't control, that's like a real red flag that you're not in the right mindset and that you're getting hung up on results and becoming entitled to wanting those results as opposed to going back into your bullseye of the things you can control. So I agree with that. And one word that I think is a real red flag, and I think I mentioned this in the little Chris video, I don't remember though, is the word should. It's amazing how often that word is used when people are in the wrong mindset. Like, for example, I should beat this guy. I should have made that ball. I should be up 4-2. I should have ball in hand right now. He missed the kick and then it came off the side pocket point and came back and hit the ball. I should have had ball in hand, or I shouldn't have, I shouldn't have been here, or I should have been there. That ball shouldn't have gone there. Or I should have had a shot. I can't believe I'm hooked after I came with that shot. All these should, or I should be out from here, and all these things. It's all about expectation and entitlement, and so for me, that is just a massive warning. It's a massive warning that you're really off the path. What do you think of that? Is that
yeah, no, I think it's right on.
and so when you're in a good state of mind, you don't take anything for granted. And the funniest part is to me, and this is why I think it's really tough. And somebody even asked me like one time, it's like, how come I can never have 2 good days in a row? It seems like I'll play good one day and bad the next, and good one day and bad the next. It's like, is this really just random variance of flipping coins? And it's like, no, it's just really easy that when you start playing really, really well, uh, that you quickly feel entitled to then the next day you play, just be like, well, I'll just do that again. And the problem is that now is you forget that when you're playing your best, you just every shot is hard, and you don't feel entitled to any of those balls going in. You're like every one of these can miss, and any one of these inches that I get out of line could cost me. And you're just kind of fighting for every inch and working for every shot. And then when you do that, you get good results. And then it's easy to just pick up your cue the next day and think, okay, well, let's just do that again. And that's an entitled mindset. You have to understand that it's going to be every time you put your cue together, it's going to be the hardest thing ever. And there's a kind of a cynical saying where I come from is I was in sales, and a sales guy I know used to tell me, he says, when you're a sales manager, how do you get salespeople to stop doing something? You show them that it works. Show them a process that works, and then they'll be, oh, cool, that works, and then they'll start cutting corners, try to find an easier way. And it's I think about that with pool all the time. It's like it's just super easy to start cutting corners. So what? Okay, so that's if entitlement, and I agree, Jesse. That's a huge as far as mental causes. That's kind of the root. What is there anything that people can do about it, or is it just inevitable that you're going to get entitled and play bad half the time?
Well, yeah. So this, I was thinking about this while you were just talking. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent with this, but I think that this is maybe you'll agree, maybe you won't, but I think that this is one of the main causes that leads into entitlement, which is this is why I think it's super important to, if you really have a goal of continuing to get better at pool, to consistently not only play against players that maybe you have a little bit of a skill edge on, but also continue to get in the ring and play against players that are they don't have to be insanely better than you, but definitely that have an edge on you. And we're seeing, this is why I don't want to go down the deep tangent of like, or the, of how where pool's at now, because it's very clear that like we're dealing with a lot of
Jesse, why do that when you could just get a handicap and beat
like,
everybody? Why not just cherry pick where it's like 587 and under tournaments, and
right,
and just play? Why don't you just only play where you always got the best of it?
yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah. So like it's a topic for another episode, but yeah. So without going too deep, I would say that's a huge factor, because what happens is when you get super comfortable winning against, especially against players that you're much better than, you don't really ever have to pay for the slight mistakes and the leaks that you have in your game. And then even when you're having an off day, or what would be considered like the bottom end of your range, you're still competitive to the level that you're still winning the sets and potentially even winning tournaments. So you don't have to actually deal with that negative emotion, because you're still getting the result that you're there for. So this creates I mean, it creates kind of a unhealthy cycle for your own pool game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that what I I really agree, and we played a bit today, and for sure, I realized that I'm in a difficult spot because I would say that not over 95% of the time I play pool, I'm either practicing on my own or playing with people that the outcome is not in doubt, because I have too big of a skill edge. And so the problem that sounds, I mean, and the funny part is it's almost like a curse. It's like if somebody's like, oh, I wish I could just win all the time. It's like, yeah, careful what you wish for, because if you get to the point where you're one of the better players in your area and you're winning all the time in the local stuff, then what ends up happening is that it's like then you play somebody that's your speed or better, where the outcome is in doubt, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, like I don't know what to like. What's this? Like I don't know what to do here. I don't have a game plan. Like I'm used to just like what, and it's weird. It sounds so obvious. Like, well, just shoot your same game and just play your game, but it's not about. It's not like you don't know that you want to just shoot your game and play well, but you're if it just you when you become accustomed to easy wins, and when you can become accustomed to results. Another way to say it is we're supposed to focus on processes, not results. But it's easy to not worry about results when you always get the results. And so, what's the challenge of the mental game challenge of pool is putting yourself in spots where you don't know if you're going to get the results, and then not allowing that to distract you into a maelstrom of concern over things that you can't control. And so to me, that's a big part of why I love pool and why I love the mental game and why I love competition. And so we got to play a little bit today, and it was a real pleasure because I wish I could play. I wish I could play you every day. You know what I mean? I love, to me, I love pool, but competition, I love competition. And I don't really consider a game competition if the outcome is not in doubt. And so I get to play a lot of pool, but I don't get to compete. And it's a different thing. And I really think that, like you said, it shines a black light on your pool game, really exposes you where you're weak physically and where you're weak mentally. And that's where it pushes you to look in the mirror and find ways to try to overcome those things and grow. And anyway, I mean, that's why it's important to go to Super Billiard Expo where you get to play great players because anyway, sorry, I'm still a little salty about the old E16. I could tell I've spent a lot of, what did I say? I spent so much time at E16. I'll tell you what, Jesse, E16 makes gate F12 look like gate B6. Okay, that's how nice E16 is. So, all right. So what did we decide? So we decided that there is a way to combat entitlement, which is make it a priority. I beg of you guys, make it a priority to do what it takes to play better players that beat that entitlement out of you. And some people complain to me that it's an hour drive to their pool room with the good players in town. It's easier to go across the street to the bar where nobody else plays, or it's just too hard to find competition. But I really push back on that because I'm like, I actually have to buy a plane ticket or something to really get in those spots that really test me that way. And I still manage. I wish I could do more, but I still find ways to test myself. And I always push myself to say, what can I do to do more of it? And so just understand it's an imperative. If you want to grow at pool, as much as I think my boot camps are great, playing better players that are going to push you, punish you, expose your weaknesses, and motivate you to work on them is the single greatest catalyst to pool growth. So
yeah, and I will say that it's kind of general life advice too, right? You hear this cliche saying of get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's a big thing in pool. Is if you're always comfortable.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
that's fine. It's certainly yeah, but if you're not okay with being in uncomfortable situations competitively, then you just won't grow as a player. It's unfortunate that you have to feel it, I guess, at times if you want to. But it's just part of growth, man. We all went through it. I went through it. I know Debbie went through it multiple times.
Today, I went through it today.
But yeah, I mean, and when you I notice it now that since I don't get to, I mean, I can use the word enjoy, I guess. Since I don't get to enjoy being uncomfortable in pool anymore because there's really not a lot of competition around here. That we're not really allowed to play in a lot of the tournaments. No, it's just true. Like
it always comes
that,
back. I know
that's taken a severe impact on both of our games. I know that. Like it's too bad, but that's for the players who can still who still have the luxury of being able to do that, and you're trying to grow. Yeah, don't run from that. It's what's going to help you get to the next level.
Yeah, and you say unfortunately you have to go through that, but you think it's unfortunate until it's taken away, and then you wish you could do it every day, because there's nothing better, man. It's what I love about pool. Besides the colorful balls, especially what my favorite is the purple 4-ball. I just love that purple 4. All right,
it's funny.
Cool, Jesse.
All right.
Well, I appreciate you coming over. I look forward to the next time. And if you guys have questions that you'd like Jesse Engel to tackle, or me, just email me, info@mnpoolbootcamp.com. Or you can also reach me by lighting the beacons. Like if you've ever seen when Gondor called for aid and they did the whole thing where they lit the beacons and they relayed the bonfires over the mountaintops. Anyway, I always have a watch on, anyway, forget it. So the people that I care about will know. So, all right. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Until next time, take care.